Daniel Sports Center. We go over our next schedule preview of this offseason, and it's for the Penn State Nittany Lions, team that went 7-6 overall in the 2021 season. Not a bad season for Penn State, but this team was on the losing end of a lot of close games last season. But this team does show potential going into 2022. Why that is we'll be going over here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, will be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with your notable games from last year. And this team, once again, was on the losing end of a lot of close games. Of course, if you look at that Iowa game on October 9th, that was a huge matchup. Both teams, I think, were in the top 4 at the time of that matchup, so it was a huge deal. And Iowa did get the win there by 3. But, I mean, Penn State, if they would have had Sean Clifford that entire game, I know Sean Clifford got injured midway through that game, and Penn State was controlling for a while. So, that game could have definitely been a win if he didn't get injured. And if you look at that Illinois game, went into 9 overtimes, which was insane to say the least. And the funny thing is too, that game went into 9 overtimes, but the score was only 20-18. It was still an incredibly low-scoring game. And of course, you see that Michigan State lost by 3. You lost to Arkansas in your bowl game by 2 touchdowns. So this team 7-6, but this team had enough talent to definitely be a 9-10 win team at least last season. So it's kind of a surprise seeing this team only get 7 in the end, but they're 5-1 of their first 6. This team started out the season really well. They were 2-5 in their last 7. So you can kind of see down the stretch. This team lost 5 of their last 7 games. Here's your roster preview going into next season. This team, of course, does return starting quarterback Sean Clifford. That's a big deal. He's been around for a while, and he's coming back for next season. He put up 3,100 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last season. So, it wasn't a bad season for him. He also had a 61% completion rate. So, his stats overall were pretty good last season, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he does next year. He definitely still has room to improve, and if he can take that next step and continue to get better, next season could be a great year for this team. If you look at the running back situation, Kevon Lee, your top running back, is returning. He put up just over 600 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. Noah Kane, your second running back, is transferring away. He put up just over 450 yards, 4 touchdowns. So you do lose your second running back there, but you do have your top one in Lee coming back, which is really what matters. Receiving core, Jahan Dotson, your top receiver, is gone. He put up just over 1,100 yards, nearly 1,200 total offense with 13 touchdowns. He was a major player on this team. Definitely one of the most talented players on this offense, if not the most. That's gonna be a tough loss there. But you do have your second and third wideouts coming back. You got Parker Washington and then Keandre Lambert-Smith, both coming back for next season. If you look at Washington, he put up over 800 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then Lambert-Smith put up just over 500 and 3 touchdowns. So really, the receiving core has got some good depth going into next season. So Jahan Dotson, obviously tough loss, but you do have your second and third coming back. So I like the depth in that position. So offensively, really not too concerned. Sean Clifford, you got your quarterback, you got your top running back, you got a couple of the receivers. You do lose 3 on the offensive line. That's where I see concern on this offense, is on the offensive line. You also lose 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 2 in the secondary. So defensively, this team takes multiple tough losses. They got a couple of hits there. The defensive line's losing a bunch, and the linebacker situation, and the secondary as well. So defensively, that's my main concern with this team. Offensively, I feel like this team definitely shows potential, but defensively, we'll see how it goes. They do have some good depth, and recruiting, of course, looks great, as we'll get into in a second here. But we'll see. Penn State, this team does lose a decent amount of talent, but nonetheless, I still expect this team to remain a contender in the Big Ten. But how high is the ceiling here for Penn State going into next season? Their ceiling was pretty high going into last year. 7-6, I think, was kind of a disappointment for this team. They definitely could have gotten 9-10 wins, but it turns out Michigan and Ohio State just were, especially Michigan was outstanding last year. Not many people expected that to happen, and Michigan ended up being kind of in the position that I expected Penn State to be in. Penn State, I felt like, would be a big contender along with Ohio State in the division, and turns out Michigan State had a great season. The Big Ten East was just stacked last season, so that kind of made it tough for Penn State, who was on the losing end of a lot of close games. But the ceiling for next season, I think, is still pretty high for Penn State. Obviously, you got some factors that need to go into play for this team to go on and potentially win the Big Ten East. But obviously, winning the Big Ten East is a very difficult thing to do. Ohio State has done for so many years, and Michigan just did it last year, so it's obviously going to be tough. But looking at your transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, this team does lose more than they received in the transfer portal. You got Daniel George, a receiver, he's in there. You got Enzo Jennings, a safety. Offensive lineman Des Holmes is at Arizona State now. You do have a receiver coming in from Western Kentucky. It'll be interesting to see how he does. That adds more depth to the receiving position. So once again, this offense I'm not too concerned about. Tinsley, Western Kentucky, that's going to be a good addition. Litton, a defensive back, is also gone, and same thing with Cam Sullivan, a receiver. So, you really don't have too many significant players leaving the program. This team isn't terribly active in the transfer portal this offseason, but you do have Tinsley coming in. That's going to be a key addition there. Recruiting-wise, this team looks excellent. You got 6th in the nation right now, which is, that is a big deal. And you're 2nd in the Big Ten. So that is a great sign for the future of this program, having a great recruiting class coming in that just adds depth for next season. Plus, the future, it makes the future look excellent for this team. So you got 3 5-stars coming in, which is huge, 13 4-stars as well. So Penn State, this team, it may have gone 7-6 last season, but the future looks good for this team. Once again, last year was kind of a surprise, the Big Ten East seeing Michigan. I expected Michigan to be good, but not that good. And then Michigan State, of course, came out of nowhere too. So, the Big Ten East was obviously a crazy division last season. But moving forward, Penn State, this team should remain a contender for many years to come. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. You start off the season with a tough one on the road at Purdue. Purdue could be good next season. I'm just saying, there are multiple teams. The Big Ten East, is more open than it has been in a long time. And the Big Ten West is, there are 5, 6 teams that could win. I'd say, 5 teams that could win that division next season. You got Purdue, you got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, potentially Nebraska. Those are the top 5 for that division. And you never know with Northwestern or even Illinois. So, it's obviously a crazy division in the West. And Purdue, very capable of winning that division next season. They're looking pretty good. So, do not sleep on that Purdue game going on the road in week 1. I think that's on a Thursday night too. So, we'll see what happens. But, that's definitely not a game to sleep on. You got Ohio the next week. You got Auburn on the road, the second game, and that home and home. Then you got Central Michigan coming to town, Northwestern as well. Then you got Michigan on the road after a bye. You got Minnesota at home, Ohio State at home, Indiana on the road, then Maryland at home, and then Rutgers on the road, and then Michigan State at home to finish out the season. So, your crossover games into the West Division, you got Northwestern, you got Purdue, you got Minnesota. So, Purdue and Minnesota should be pretty good. I don't know about Northwestern, but yes, Penn State, you do have a somewhat tough schedule, also playing Auburn, who's usually pretty good. But looking at the first half of your schedule, Purdue, I'm going to favor Penn State in that game. That is tough, though. That's about a 50-50 there with Penn State going on the road. But I feel like the experience that Penn State has going into next season will be to their advantage. Then you got Ohio at home. I'm going to say that's an easy win, probably. Ohio, don't really expect too much out of them. Auburn on the road. I will favor the Tigers in that matchup against Auburn. I do feel like in that situation, being on the road, it's a tough environment. I feel like Auburn, I'm going to favor them in this game, but it's close. Central Michigan, easy win. Northwestern, close, but I will favor Penn State. I'd probably favor Penn State a decent amount there. Northwestern, they're such an unpredictable team. 1 year, 2 years ago, they just won the Big Ten West. And last season, they were the worst team in the Big Ten West. So you never know, but I will favor Penn State there. And then Michigan on the road, got to favor the Wolverines there. I feel like Michigan next season, they're looking excellent going into next season. If you thought they were good in 2021, they could be even better next season. So, Michigan definitely a team to keep an eye on. And looking at the second half of your schedule, Minnesota, I'll favor Penn State there with it being at home. Ohio State at home, that's tough. The Buckeyes, Penn State is such a tough place to play. Probably I'd say the toughest environment in the Big Ten, especially at night. But Ohio State, I'm going to favor the Buckeyes barely there. Ohio State's probably my favorite to win the Big Ten East. Yeah, big surprise, I know. But Ohio State, they're looking great going into next year, returning a lot of their key starters from last season. Indiana on the road, just because it's on the road, I'll put it in yellow, but I'll favor Penn State. Maryland at home, I'll favor Penn State there as well, and same thing with Rutgers being on the road. So I do favor Penn State in in most of those games in November until Michigan State at home. Michigan State, that game is literally a coin toss. Spartans coming into a tough environment. But Michigan State looks good as well next season. Honestly, we'll see what I do when we come out with our final predictions, where I'll predict the games one by one. But Michigan State, I'm going to favor them barely right now, but it is very close. Regular projection, I'm going to say 7-5 to 10-2 for this team. I do think this team does take 2 losses. I mean, the schedule is tough enough to the point where I'd be very surprised if this team got out with only 1 loss. So I'll put the ceiling at 10-2, the floor at 7-5. I think 8 to 10, maybe 9 to 10 wins is very reasonable for this team. I think 7-5 is kind of low for a floor. I think this team is very capable of getting at least 8 wins next season. But that said, let me know your thoughts and comments below on this team. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.